Did you ever have any concerns or worries at any point that because of the work you had been doing and the amount of hours and countless investigation and interviews that you did with different family members, police, other specialists, did you ever have a concern that it would all fall through on the basis that Chris couldn't get a fair trial?
I had a huge concern about that. Yeah, I was very worried through 2019 and 2020 that the efforts of so many people to help me, the efforts that I had gone to, and the risks that I'd taken, my employer had taken, legal risks, editorial risks, journalistic risks, would all end up being effectively traduced, and that he would be able to rely on the product, the podcast, which we believe led to him being charged in the first place, being the thing that gave him the, escape strategy. It was an awful proposition, to contemplate that. It just used to leave my guts churned, and I would be unnerved pretty much every time his lawyers made a further demand for material or made a statement on television or to media conferences. They often did after some of the preliminary proceedings, in which they took the opportunity to have a swing at the teacher's pet, the podcast, and me, and so on. And I just thought, oh, God, when are we actually going to be able to get through all of this and into the nitty gritty and the questions over his probable guilt? I was in no doubt that he was a cold-blooded murderer and that he was spending a lot of money on very effective legal representation. That's his right. And of course, there is this, presumption of innocence. I didn't presume him innocent, though. So, I'm not going to lie. I presumed him utterly guilty. I tried to give him his side of the story in the podcast, and he decided that he didn't want to talk. So I did the best thing I did the next best thing I could. I tried to present his side of the story through the lawyering by his brother, Peter, from when Peter was in an inquest on behalf of Chris and Chris's twin brother, Paul. And, I was also looking for people who knew Chris personally who might speak on his behalf. And one of those was a mate of mine called Scott Sattler, who had been at Coomba State High on the Gold Coast, fantastic rugby league player. And Chris and Paul Dawson had helped mentor Scott. And so Scott was talking on Chris's behalf. But overwhelmingly, the teacher's pet, was a very focused and, I think, evidence-based examination of a case that was so strongly circumstantial in pointing to his guilt that it just was incredible for me and so many other people that he had never been charged. And I couldn't make a 50-50 kind of story about Chris Dawson. I couldn't. There was not enough. There wasn't nearly enough material to even get to 80-20 representation, and that's not my fault. It's his. He was just guilty from the get-go.
Did you ever struggle with this? I guess the how sensitive the investigations were.
What I struggled with after I'd done several episodes and after I had uncovered more evidence and talked to more people, I struggled with the traditional convention, the need for journalists to maintain balance, to try to be objective and not form, a hard and fast view. I couldn't rationally, logically maintain objectivity or be balanced when it came to Chris Dawson, because I couldn't see any evidence that gave me comfort that perhaps he was an innocent man. It just didn't exist. So, and I think that, you know, sometimes in journalism, and perhaps the perception of audiences is that journalists, you know, ideally really have to never kind of form that view. They just have to be the messenger. That's ridiculous. We're not robots. We're all influenced by our education, our cultural values, our upbringing, our relationships, and, you know, what we regard as being capable of passing you know, the pub test of what's believable, what's credible. And to me, it was never likely that Lynn had just decided to start a new life after telling Chris she was going to change some clothes on a shopping trip, and she's wearing a pair of pink shorts and has got very little dough and leaves behind her girls and a house worth almost 300 grand.
Yeah.
That was just stupid. But as I got more into the case and more involved, it became even more stupid, that idea. And so I found it increasingly difficult to avoid the what some people referred to as the sound of righteous anger as I was narrating and telling the story and interviewing people. I took a side. I really did. But, you know, by the same token, this was a case that when I started investigating, it was 36 years old. Dawson had got away with murder for 36 years, and a case so old, it demanded pretty front-footed, robust investigative journalism to make a difference. If I had gone into it and finished it with timidity, with you know, punches pulled and ticking all the boxes of theoretical fairness and balance that perhaps some of the, you know, armchair experts would have preferred, well, you know, I think Dawson would still be living the life in his beachside house on the Sunshine Coast, and this woman and her family would have still been searching for justice and knowing they'd never, ever get it. This was the last chance. So we took risks. We really pushed the envelope, and thankfully the system finally kicked in and worked.